The forest burned. Smoke curled and twisted through the dusk sky, turning the fading light a bloody red. Birds had long gone silent. Trees crackled in the distance. Somewhere the wind howled, fanning the flames deeper into the wilderness. The fire, once small and forgotten, now devoured everything in its path, unchallenged. The nearest firefighters were miles away, misled by a false call to a separate ridge. No help was coming here, not soon enough. But help would come from the most unlikely place imaginable. A large black bear lumbered down the slope, disoriented and panting. His fur was singed in patches, paws scorched from fleeing the heated ground. His name, though no human knew it, was Bramble. An aging male, once the dominant force in this stretch of land, now driven from his den by the creeping blaze. His world had narrowed to two things: pain and survival. Ash stuck to his snout as he snuffled the air, trying to find a clear direction. North smelled of fire, south of more fire. There was nowhere safe. Until he froze. A sound, faint, sure, not of the forest. A cry. Bramble's head turned sharply toward the noise. Smoke veiled his vision, but just beyond the undergrowth something caught his eye. Metal. A shape both familiar and foreign. A car half sunken into the ditch beside the forest road. It was a rusting shell, the rear end already scorched black. One front tire burned steadily like a torch. The bear moved closer, wary. The scent was wrong. Gasoline. Smoke. Rubber. And then, again. That sound. A high-pitched scream, choked and desperate. He huffed. His ears twitched. With heavy, trembling steps he approached the car. Flames licked the undercarriage. Windows fogged and cracked from heat. But through a rear side window, just barely, he saw her. A little girl. She couldn't have been older than 5. Her face was smeared with ash and tears, her lips cracked, her cheeks flushed from heat. Her tiny fists pounded weakly against the glass. She was coughing, gasping, and worst of all, she was chained. Thick iron cuffs were locked around her ankles, bolted to the car's backseat frame. Bramble blinked. He had no concept of cruelty as humans did, but instinct told him, she can't escape. Her eyes locked with his, terror giving way to the faintest flicker of hope. Then she screamed again as the seat beside her burst into flames. Bramble bared his teeth, not in threat but in instinctual urgency. He circled the car, grunting, growling. Smoke burned his throat. He pawed at the rear door, but it didn't budge. He rammed it with his shoulder. Once. Twice. A third time. The metal groaned but didn't give. His massive frame shuddered with each impact. The heat was unbearable now. Inside, the little girl slumped to the side, coughing blood-tinged phlegm, her eyelids fluttering. The air was running out. Bramble roared, a deep, guttural bellow that split the trees. And that was the moment Mason saw him. From behind a crumbled trail marker, a lone man stood frozen, sweat streaking down his dirt-caked face. Mason, a former firefighter, had been hiking the less-traveled trails for days. He didn't like people anymore. Didn't trust himself around them. The ghosts of a fire he couldn't forget haunted his every step. So when he heard the low roar, he thought it was in his head again. A memory. But then he saw the bear, massive, black as coal, slamming into the side of a burning car. His first thought, it's attacking someone. He reached into his backpack with trembling hands and pulled out a flare gun. Raised it. Took aim. And then he heard the scream. Not an animal's. A child's. His hand lowered slowly. He stepped forward, eyes narrowing through the smoke. What the hell? The bear wasn't attacking. It was trying to open the car. Mason rushed forward, abandoning caution. The air was thick, suffocating. He dropped the flare and grabbed a fallen branch to clear debris. As he neared the car, he caught his first full glimpse of the girl. Dear God. She looked barely alive. Chains glinted near her feet. Her face was pressed to the window, her hand reaching out. But just then the bear reared. With a thunderous growl, Bramble stood on his hind legs and smashed his paw through the window, shattering the glass. The bear's skin split at the knuckles from the impact, blood mixing with soot. Mason dove toward the car, shielding the girl's face from falling glass. Bramble stepped back, chest heaving, eyes locked on Mason, uncertain but no longer hostile. Under the hood, a sudden eruption. Flames shot out with a whoosh, lighting up the night. The girl's small hand reached out through the broken glass, trembling, blistered. Mason grabbed it. Hang on, he whispered, I've got you. Flames snapped like angry whips around the burning car, rising higher, spreading faster. The air pulsed with heat, oxygen thinning by the second. Mason's lungs burned. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of memory and the impossibility of the moment in front of him. He stood just feet from a full-grown bear. But the bear didn't lunge, didn't growl, didn't attack. Instead, Bramble backed away, slowly, deliberately, as if making space, as if saying, "Your turn now." The girl's tiny arm hung limp from the shattered rear window, glass shards clinging to her skin. Mason saw the blisters already forming. Her face was barely visible through the black smoke clouding the car's interior. The fire was eating toward her seat, crackling with deadly promise. Mason's instincts slammed back into gear. He dropped the flare gun without a second thought, gritted his teeth, and smashed the back window with the butt of his elbow, ignoring the shards slicing through his skin. He reached in, fingers finding the child's shoulder, gently trying to lift her. But she didn't move. He reached lower. Chains. Mason blinked through the smoke, heart thudding. Her ankles were locked in thick iron cuffs, bolted tightly to the car's seat frame. The links rattled as he tugged, but they didn't give. She's chained in. Who the hell does that to a child? He coughed violently, covering her face with his hand as the flames leapt closer. His fingers scrambled for the latches, the bolts, anything he could pry or pull. But they wouldn't budge. The metal was already red-hot. He didn't have bolt cutters. He didn't even have a proper knife. And time was gone. The flames reached the back of the driver's seat, igniting it instantly. But then, the bear roared again. Mason turned in shock. Bramble surged forward, not at him but at the flames. The bear lunged past Mason, grabbed the burning seat cushion in his massive jaws, and ripped it out, dragging it backward away from the girl. The fire clung to Bramble's fur, climbing up his face. His nose singed. His eyes squinted shut. He shook violently to extinguish the flames but didn't run. You stayed. You stayed. Mason stared for half a second too long. The image seared into his mind, a beast of muscle and claw risking itself for a child it didn't know. The smoke, the fire, the helpless child, it all collided with a brutal flash of the past. Flashback. Another fire. Another car. Another child. Years ago, Mason had been the first responder at a highway pileup. A minivan engulfed in flame, a toddler still inside. He tried. God, he tried. But the flames had been too fast, the door too stuck. He pulled 3 people out of wreckage that day, but not the child. Not her. He remembered the sound of her screams. And how they ended. That was the last day Mason wore the uniform. No, Mason growled, yanking himself back to the present. Not again. Not this time. He ripped off his belt, threading it through the chain. Then he grabbed a jagged rock from the ground and wedged it beneath one of the cuffs. Sweat poured down his face. His shirt stuck to his skin. The flames were licking toward the back seat now. Come on. Come on, break. He slammed the rock against the link again. And again. Snap. One cuff gave way, breaking at a corroded weak point. Got you, he breathed, yanking the girl up as he tugged at the other cuff, only partially severed. She whimpered faintly, a sound so fragile it almost didn't exist. Mason didn't stop. With raw adrenaline, he yanked the chain, bending the seat frame until the last bolt tore loose. The girl slumped into his arms, her skin hot to the touch, breath shallow and thin. He cradled her, shielding her from the flames, turning. Boom. The hood blew open with a thunderous explosion as the fire reached the fuel line. Shrapnel whistled through the air. A fiery shockwave slammed into them. But before the force could throw them into the inferno, Bramble moved. The bear charged, shoving Mason and the girl away from the car with a full-bodied nudge. Mason hit the ground hard, curling around the child. Dirt and sparks showered over them. The car exploded behind them. A wall of fire roared into the night, sending birds scattering miles away. The blast cracked branches and flattened bushes. Heat scalded the earth. And in the middle of it all, Bramble stood, absorbing the brunt of it. His fur singed. His massive frame shaking. But standing. Mason blinked, vision blurred. He coughed again, harder this time, and felt the girl still breathing, barely, against his chest. He shifted, trying to sit up. Hey, he murmured hoarsely, brushing ash from her cheeks. You're safe now. You're safe. He turned. The bear was gone. No roar. No farewell. Just burned earth where Bramble had stood moments before. A trail of bloody paw prints led away into the trees, staggered, limping. Mason's heart dropped. Wait, he called, his voice raw. Wait. But the smoke swallowed his words. Bramble had vanished into the burning forest. Gone. The forest had stopped burning. Smoke still hung low over the charred trees, but the fury of the fire had passed. Now only its scars remained, blackened trunks, singed grass, and silence where birds once sang. Mason pushed through that silence, carrying the unconscious girl in his arms. His legs trembled beneath the weight, not from her but from everything else. The explosion, the bear, the smell of burning flesh that still clung to his shirt. He reached the ranger station, staggering through the door, collapsing to his knees. Help. She needs help. The medics rushed in. A nurse took the girl, checking her pulse and oxygen levels while calling in a medevac. Mason tried to stand but wobbled. Another ranger caught him by the elbow, guiding him to a bench. She was chained inside, Mason managed to whisper. The fire, she was left to die. 2 hours later. The girl finally opened her eyes and screamed. It wasn't just the scream of confusion or fear, it was pure panic. She clawed at the sheets, flinched at the bright ceiling light. Her voice cracked from smoke damage, but she repeated one word again and again. Lock. Daddy. Fire. Mason stood just outside the glass, staring through the window, fists clenched. Shocking discovery. The forensic team combed through the wreckage of the car. A second set of keys was found lodged under the driver's seat. Investigators noted something odd. The burn pattern didn't align with an external ignition. Fuel accelerant residue was traced inside the front cabin. Then came the bombshell. A man's wallet, charred but intact, wedged between the front seats. ID still legible. Gregory Lang. They ran his name through the database, and what came back sickened everyone. Lang had an active warrant. Multiple allegations of child abuse, illegal restraint, and fleeing custody in another state. A recent case file even listed him as a suspect in a pending custodial interference investigation. But that wasn't the worst part. Lang had called 911 an hour before the fire, giving a false tip about a wildfire breaking out several miles east of the actual location. That false alarm had pulled emergency responders away from the girl's location. It had all been a setup. CPS and police involvement. The authorities stepped in quickly. The girl, whose name turned out to be Eva Lang, was placed into protective custody. A medical report confirmed old bruises and wrist scarring consistent with prolonged restraints. The homemade cuffs Mason had seen? Crafted using repurposed construction materials and reinforced with lock bolts. The man had planned it all, the location, the trap, the fake emergency. Eva had been left to burn. Mason's unbelievable claim. The station bustled with investigators and rescue teams, but Mason couldn't let go of what he'd seen. He found himself repeating the same line to anyone who would listen. It wasn't just me. A bear helped us. A few chuckled. Most politely nodded and moved on. One officer joked that Mason must have inhaled too much smoke. But Mason didn't back down. He pulled a burning seat away. Took the explosion head-on. If he hadn't been there, we'd both be dead. Are you saying a wild bear saved a human child? The lead ranger asked, raising an eyebrow. I'm saying he chose to help instead of run. The room fell silent. The drawing. Later that night, a nurse called Mason back into Eva's room. The little girl had been given crayons, part therapy, part distraction. She'd made a single drawing and wouldn't let it go until someone showed Mason. He stepped into the room slowly. Eva looked at him with cautious eyes, then held up the paper. It showed a child in flames, a man crouching beside her, and a massive bear standing between them and a burning car. The bear's paw, colored dark red and smeared beyond the edge of the paper, was unmistakably wounded. I told you, Mason said, voice low with awe. She saw him too. The story hit the local press within hours. Guardian Bear Saves Girl from Fire, the headline read. Social media ran wild. Was it real? A myth? Or something in between? Some called for the bear to be located, tagged, and protected. Others feared he could be dangerous. Burned animals often turn aggressive. Debate raged, but Mason stayed quiet. He had only one goal now. Find Bramble. Back to the forest. 2 nights later, Mason left without telling anyone. He returned to the edge of the burned zone where it had all happened. He brought a thermal blanket, a first aid kit, and Eva's drawing rolled carefully in his coat. He followed blood trails first, small at first, then more erratic. Burned fur clung to branches. Scorched paw prints dug into soft earth near the river. Mason paused when he saw a collapsed form in the distance, barely moving. It was Bramble. The bear's breathing was shallow. His chest rose and fell like a broken bellows. Burned scars painted his side, his front paw blackened and split. Mason approached slowly, hands raised. It's me, he said softly. You remember, don't you? Bramble's eyes cracked open. Then he growled. The sound was weak but clear, a warning. Stay back. Mason froze. His instincts told him to run. But instead, he reached into his coat, unrolled Eva's drawing and laid it on the ground. "Look," he said. "She remembers too." The growl stopped. Bramble's burned paw shifted slightly. His eyes focused on the paper. For a long moment nothing moved. Then the massive bear let out a breath, more a sigh than a threat, and lowered his head. The sun rose slowly over the blackened forest, casting long rays through the smoke-stained canopy. In a quiet clearing by the river, Bramble lay curled in the tall grass, too weak to move, barely breathing. Mason crouched beside him, unzipping the emergency kit he'd packed. His hands worked with the urgency of someone with too much to lose, but not recklessly. Every motion was careful, respectful. He poured clean water into a shallow cooking pan and slid it toward the bear. Bramble sniffed it, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. Mason whispered, "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." The bear didn't drink, not yet, but he didn't move away either. It was a start. Bramble's rescue. The next 3 days blurred into one long cycle of survival. Mason left food, fish, berries, boiled oats. He built a rudimentary lean-to nearby to shelter them both from the rain. Most critically, he cleaned Bramble's burns with antiseptic from his kit, whispering reassurances every time the bear flinched or groaned. By the 4th day, Bramble lifted his head when Mason approached. By the 6th, he ate from Mason's hand. When a storm passed overhead, Mason sat beside him, shielding the animal's body with a tarp. He didn't sleep much. He didn't care. For the first time in years he felt purpose. And still he kept Eva's drawing in his coat pocket, folded but never far. Public pressure. But peace couldn't last forever. The media had taken hold of the story like wildfire. "Guardian Bear Saves Girl from Inferno" headlined every major outlet. Talk shows dissected the mystery. Was the bear real? Was Mason hallucinating? Had grief broken the ex-firefighter? Photos of Mason surfaced from traffic cams and old service records. Then came the public statement from authorities. "We believe the child is safe. We urge Mr. Mason to come forward. We fear both he and the wild animal may be unstable or in danger." They didn't understand. They hadn't seen what he had. The world wanted to classify everything, hero or threat, animal or monster. Mason knew the truth didn't fit in those boxes. And then everything changed again. The girl speaks. Eva sat nervously in a hospital chair on national television, a gentle therapist beside her. Cameras were everywhere, but her eyes focused on a small stuffed bear she held tightly. "What do you remember from that day, Eva?" the interviewer asked gently. The girl was silent for a long time. "Then, there was fire. I was crying. Daddy left me." The room stilled. "The man came. But I saw him after. The bear came first. He pulled the fire seat. He made it stop. He stood in front of me. Like a wall." The interviewer blinked, stunned. "What do you want to say, Eva?" Eva clutched the stuffed bear and looked straight into the camera. "Is the bear okay?" It broke the nation's heart. The standoff. Rangers, armed and tense, closed in on Mason's location 3 days later. Helicopters buzzed overhead, casting shadows across the clearing. Voices crackled over radios. "We have a visual on the bear. Confirm, subject is with the man. Standing. Not attacking." On the ground, Mason stood slowly from beside Bramble, arms spread wide. He wasn't leaving. He wouldn't abandon Bramble. Not now. Bramble, still weak but upright, rose beside him. The bear's body was leaner now but still massive. He didn't bare his teeth. He didn't growl. He stood. As if he understood. The lead ranger raised his tranquilizer rifle. Then another sound broke through the air, a whir of blades as a second helicopter landed near the edge of the clearing. A medic stepped out, followed by Eva, now wrapped in a blue coat, hand in a ranger's grip. When she saw Bramble, she pulled free. She ran full speed, straight across the ash-covered clearing. "Bramble!" Mason gasped. The rangers tensed. But Bramble didn't move. Eva stopped inches from the towering animal, panting, eyes wide. Then, from her coat pocket she pulled something fragile and handmade. A flower crown woven from field daisies, charred leaves and thin twigs. She placed it gently on Bramble's head, exactly like the one in her drawing. "Thank you," she whispered. The clearing held its breath. Tears and transformation. The lead ranger, a stern man with a skeptical streak, lowered his weapon. "He saved her," he muttered. "Let him be." One by one the rest followed. A medic approached Mason. Another lifted Eva gently in his arms. But she kept looking back at the bear, eyes filled with something beyond gratitude, love. That night the governor issued a state order. The bear known as Bramble shall not be hunted, captured, or relocated. He is to be protected under emergency wildlife preservation due to unprecedented circumstances. It was the first ruling of its kind in the country. New beginnings. Mason adopted Eva 3 months later. It took time, therapy, counseling, court hearings, but the bond was instant and unshakable. She never had to say why she wanted to stay with him. Everyone knew. They moved near the forest edge, close to the river. Every year, on the anniversary of the fire, they returned to the clearing together, bringing food, flowers, and new drawings. Bramble never came close again. But always, just before dusk, they'd find a gift near the riverbank. Sometimes a feather. Sometimes a fish. Once, a perfectly unburned pine cone, resting beside a half-chewed flower crown. Final image. Years passed. Eva grew older, taller, stronger, fearless. One spring evening, she and Mason stood by the clearing again. The fire scars had faded. Grass had returned. New trees rose along the river bend. Eva knelt and pulled a folded paper from her bag. She placed it on the rock where the crown had first rested. Then she stepped back and smiled. It was a new drawing. A bear. A little girl. A man. All standing together, surrounded by fire but untouched. Protected. Together.